as emergency managers or emergency responders, obviously we get a little more training and education in this, but what we do is not way beyond the scope of everybody.
Right.
So when we look at this and look at any situation, we really just break it down to the basic principles. Anybody can do it if they understand those principles.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Perez.
And I'm Wesley Long.
And we're bringing you a fresh new take on disaster preparedness.
Welcome to Disaster Class.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Disaster Class Podcast. I'm Jason Perez.
And I'm Wesley Long, and I'm excited to be here.
We are excited here. So maybe, I don't know if we have Nat Sellers with us today, the preparedness guy, not a preparedness guy, the preparedness guy.
Preparedness guy.
But I don't know if he wants to do, we have a little tradition with the bell. Classes in session.
Classes in session.
There we go. Yes. Thank you.
We have a thing, and you nailed it.
Nat, it is awesome to have you with us. So just maybe a little introduction. Yeah. So you are a professional emergency manager, but you're also just a preparedness and survival enthusiast. And you have a little social media presence. You're known as the preparedness guy. And you're also starting up a podcast on the Readiness Lab Network. So first of all, welcome to Disaster Class.
Thank you.
So maybe just to start, I know sometimes on our Disaster Class social media page, we'll repost some of your stuff because
hilarious.
We've actually, before we got to meet you, we had been following you for
quite a while. Yeah.
Yeah, so we love some of the stuff.
For any of our viewers and listeners, if you haven't checked out the Preparedness Guy, do it. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Thank you.
No, we thank you.
So maybe we could just start getting a little bit about your background, your origin story. Tell us about how it all started.
Yeah, I was bitten by a radioactive emergency kit.
Of course.
Nice. I love this origin story. They never really gave us the full story in the MCU, so this is great.
Yeah, then after like a montage of preparedness clips, here I am.
Bam!
I love it.
Bam!
I should try that.
I love it. I love it.
So, I don't know if there was one, pivotal moment. I think there were a lot of pivotal moments. I talk about some of them in episode 1 of Preparedness Works.
Nice. That's the name of your podcast on the Readiness Lab.
That's the name of my podcast. Yeah. So I do talk about a couple incidents that happened when I was young, but there were a lot. I did have some good examples around me of people who responded well in emergencies and disasters. My scoutmaster, when I was a teenager, I was in the Boy Scouts, became an Eagle Scout, so be prepared as part of that. But my scoutmaster was a firefighter, fire captain, and just seeing him cool as a cucumber and competent in high stress environments when somebody was hurt, when we rolled up on a car accident on the way home from camp and he just knew what to do. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like not knowing what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like feeling helpless in different situations. And in that episode, I talk about a couple of situations one situation where I did feel helpless, but I knew I wanted to do something. So I tried to learn as much as I could, from the Western United States, Intermountain West, and in Idaho. And so preparedness is kind of part of the culture there. Mm-hmm. And, so is basically all things around that, shooting guns, going camping, doing all that sort of thing. So part of it was just being raised in the environment, and nobody called themselves a prepper. I don't think the phrase was coined until like 1998 anyway, or something like that. See how many times I can say something like that.
Something like that. Turn this into a drinking game. Ding.
Yeah. So I can't say like, I was always a prepper. I was raised a prepper. We, when I was a teenager, I took hunter's ed. We went hunting once a year. We occasionally would can something, but anyway, we always had some sort of food storage. But overall, I wasn't, we really wouldn't have considered myself a prepper, and the term is so loaded that it's hard to use it anyway.
Yeah.
But as I kind of went on this journey to be more competent and more capable, learning new skills, learning about what tools I needed and resources that I would need to be able to help other people and help myself. And it took me, many years accumulating skills where I, realized like I am trying to prepare for anything. There's a quote from Lord Baden-Powell, Robert Baden-Powell. He's the founder of the scouting movement over in the UK. And somebody once asked him about the motto, be prepared. Be prepared for what? He says, oh, any old thing. And I really like that because it's not necessarily a doomsday thing. A lot of people have their pet doomsday scenario. That's something that, I've talked to a lot of people about that, but that's kind of a fear-based approach,
right.
Which a lot of people think if I'm prepared for the worst case scenario, I'm prepared for anything. And I really think it's opposite. If you're prepared for everything, you're prepared for anything. So if you prepare for your needs, you don't worry about the distractions that are behind you, focus on what you need. And then the hazard and disruption doesn't matter so much. Right. So it is fun to talk about zombies and post-apocalyptic scenarios, all of that sort of thing. And so it's fun to talk about that, and there are lessons to be learned from that. But overall, it's just you focus on your needs, and then the minor disasters, major disasters, you're better off than you were.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I think of prepper, and of course now I think it's morphed into this thing of like zombies and post-apocalyptic thing. But when you really get down to the very basis of it, it's just learning how to live simply and off the land and resources, right? It's kind of like we're so used to our modern world, like technology, that we've become so dependent on these things, where really the people who are preppers, they know how to live off of without those modern day conveniences, which is, back in the old times, that was just called life,
right?
Yeah, it's a lot of it is just becoming more self-reliant and shortening your supply chain. If I am completely reliant on a component of something that has to go from Taiwan to Japan to San Francisco across to a factory in the Midwest to be assembled and then shipped to me,
so many points of failure there.
Yeah, right. So many points of failure. And if I can find an alternative that I have more control over, then it's less susceptible to disruption.
Yep. Yeah, just makes sense. Just makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like what you said. He's now a professional emergency manager. He doesn't just play one on social media.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. What do you do for your profession?
And also, how did you get into that too?
Yeah, I back in the day, a long time ago, I joined the National Guard, the Army National Guard. They trained me as a combat medic, and that included all what did I say?
Expense paid trip to
all expense paid trip to Iraq. So, it definitely good amount of training and all of that. So that would kind of set me off on a professional course of my origin story. And I came back. They paid for college, so I was in college. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And towards the end, I learned that there was a career field called emergency management. Because I was thinking like, man, if I could just do survival stuff as a job, that would be awesome. And there's kind of a division between like wilderness survival and emergency preparedness, even though there's a lot of crossover as well. But I looked at like rec management, which was if I didn't have to worry about providing for my family, that might have been the degree I followed. Sorry to any rec management majors out there, but that's the cool stuff. You got to go do all the outdoor adventure stuff, working with different groups, team building, leadership skills, all integrated. And that's kind of the approach that I'm trying to take with emergency preparedness and emergency management, is that there are life skills you can learn as you go through this. It's valuable just by doing the process of becoming more prepared, not just the end result. But so I realized that that was a career path. I was most of the way through school, and I thought, well, better graduate as quickly as possible. And I just did whatever I needed to graduate, and then get into the field and do a master's program. And I got my master's degree in emergency and disaster management, started working full time. I've done public health, higher education, healthcare, worked with a lot of different communities and organizations. I switched to the Air National Guard and was an emergency manager for them. They trained me as a hazmat technician, a seaburn specialist. Really, really cool opportunity to do that. A cool job as far as military jobs go. You know, a lot less sweeping floors and sleeping in the mud. I had a lot of fun and a lot of time doing that, but definitely got to level up.
Nice.
Switched into the Air Force. Got to go to UAE for 6 months and do some seaburn stuff over there and emergency management. So it's all just kind of part of it. And right now I'm trying to build up the emergency preparedness side of it because that's where I think the most impact is. Maybe not the most widespread impact. Emergency management is very top down because if you can change the policy, that's going to change people's behavior, because anytime a policy or a program or a law is implemented, then basically people are compelled to obey and comply. But I really am looking at the bottom up, empowering individuals, making them as capable as possible.
Hey everyone, just want to pause real quick to thank Sawyer Products for sponsoring this episode of Disaster Class. Sawyer Products offer the best, most technologically advanced solutions for protection against sun, bugs, water, and injuries. Everything from water filtration systems to insect repellents. I personally have been using their water filters for years. So if you're at work, at home, or at play, make sure you check out Sawyer Products at sawyer.com.
That's really our mindset too at Instinct Ready, is a ground up grassroots approach. It's so hard to get things coming down from the top down, but if you can invoke that change from the bottom, it can do so much good. And you've talked about and just now, like some of the life skills that you can learn in preparedness. Like, it can be fun. Now your podcast, so the podcast is Preparedness Works, right? That's right. That's the title. So now you kind of have a specific goal in that podcast. What is it that you're working towards, and what are you going to be covering in that podcast?
So quite a few things and I like the term Preparedness Works. In the first episode, I talked about how we switched it from being master of the preparedness arts to Preparedness Works, and the benefits of either title. But I really like Preparedness Works because the term works can mean a lot of different things. So I talk about those, but you think about, like, it works, it's because it does, right? That's Preparedness Works. It's functional. But the works on a pizza is everything. So all topics related to preparedness, if we're talking about the works, and then like the inner workings, the works of a clock. So breaking it down and looking at the aspects of how things fit together, how they work most effectively and efficiently. So what I want to do with it is talk about those principles, really break it down, question kind of the myths that are out there. A lot of, we'll just look at one thing. I just did a video with Contingency Medical. They're an antibiotic company. And a lot of people get animal antibiotics, which are the same antibiotics, right? You can go, you buy them without a prescription. They are the same actual antibiotics, but you haven't been screened by a physician. You don't have somebody you can call and consult, and that's what these companies are doing. So I did a video with one of them where I go into a store and I'm being all sneaky, so no one tells me that I get caught trying to buy these antibiotics, but that's kind of it's not a myth, but it's just one of these things that, like, man, there's just a simpler way, because you can go through a physician and do it. And there are people have some questions about, should we be allowing people just to have antibiotics on hand? But there's a guidebook with it that says these are the conditions that you would have that would require this specific medication, and you get physician consultation. Like, you can pick up the phone, but in case of a disaster and you can't pick up someone on the phone, you've got the right medications in the right dose for the right conditions ready to go. So just finding better solutions for things. And I know it's not a perfect solution, and other people might feel confident in their own medical skills where they could get the fish amoxicillin or whatever. But I'm just trying to look at the best tools. We're looking at tourniquets. The cat tourniquet is kind of the gold standard, or similar tourniquets, the ones that are effective versus I'm going to say it, like the rats tourniquet. I'm not a fan. Not that it can't be effective, but that the cat tourniquet is built to be effective versus the rats requires the user to be effective. Right. So my kids can use the cat tourniquet effectively.
Yep.
I could use the rats effectively, but I want something that's going to do the work for me.
Yeah.
And that's episode 3.
Nice.
Setting yourself up for success. Preparedness Works.
Right.
So what else I want to do with the podcast is find the individual stories. I just did an interview with a lady who had evacuated in a wildfire. And that was her second wildfire she's had to evacuate from, and living in 2 different locations. And hearing her story it's just really eye-opening because not everybody experiences every emergency. I mean, those of us who are in emergency services, emergency management, we're more likely to interact with high stress situations or people who are dealing with that. But when we're preparing, we're like, is this even worth my time, worth my effort? And not that we're preparing for the disasters, like we're preparing to meet our needs. But if you're meeting your needs, then it's never a waste, because you're buying things that you're going to use anyway, that you could rotate through, or that you've identified as something like a fire extinguisher. Maybe you'll never use it, but it's still worth having. It's investment and insurance on that. But talking to these people who have been in these different situations, emergencies, how they prepared ahead of time to make their response more effective, the lessons they learned, and the tips they have for other people. And then we try to have a little bit of fun afterwards. In this last episode, we talked about the Goonies and preparedness lessons we learned from that. And I asked her, what would you do if you were the emergency management of emergency manager of the town, and you had to deal with all of these events that are happening? I talked about some of the events, and she's like, well, obviously I'm concerned about the kids. I was like, yeah, that's a good answer. Priorities are life safety of people. But I did feel a little bit like I sprung it on her. I didn't tell her what to expect, but she handled it so well. And that's another thing too, is as emergency managers or emergency responders, obviously we get a little more training and education in this, but what we do is not way beyond the scope of everybody. So when we look at this and look at any situation, we really just break it down to the basic principles. Anybody can do it if they understand those principles, and that's what I want to get to is the principles, and how can you implement them in your own life.
Man, that's beautiful. We can accomplish anything when we understand how it works. Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to catching and listening to your podcast. Yeah, and of course that's on the Readiness Lab. So it's your show is going to be one of our sister shows on the Readiness Lab. So you can find out more about it on the readinesslab.com.
We're going to have to get his logo up there.
Yeah, we'll have to add you to.
Yeah, we're going to add you to the team.
To the team here.
Yeah, nice. Awesome.
Nice. So one of the things that you've talked about in the past is, and especially when it comes to preppers, there's a little bit of a stigma out there. But you've also talked about, and as your title of your podcast, Preparedness Works.
It does work.
So what's some of the, I mean, I think you've done, you like that kind of evidence-based approach, and some of the things you've talked about as far as how preppers can actually be a force for good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I was on with John on his podcast earlier this week or last week or something. We recorded something, and he's like, I am not a fan of the bunkers. Essentially is what he said. And it's like, I get what you're saying, but I want to ask, like, does anybody know anybody with a bunker? Like, I've never met a single person with an actual bunker. Nope. I know they're out there, but they're probably, thousands of them, not hundreds of thousands, definitely not millions, not hundreds of millions.
Right.
And, so I get it. Like it seems to him and to most of us, like, oh, that's an extreme thing. You watch the shows like National Geographic's Doomsday Preppers, and it definitely skews people in a certain way. And it's a show. It's made for entertainment. We're all required to pick some cataclysmic event as the specific scenario they're responding to, and then they're kind of put through the ringer on something that would make it good television, not just people telling their actual story. And I've met several people who've been on that show, and guess what? They're normal people. Not that they don't think that bad things can or will happen,
right.
But over the last 3 years, we've 2.5 years, whatever, we've all known that bad things can happen. Yes. Even longer than that. Like if any of us have really just been paying attention to anything our entire lives, we know that sometimes bad things happen. Yeah. And you have a choice. You can say, oh yeah, sometimes bad things do happen. What do I need to make sure I get through that? Or you can be like, well, sometimes bad things happen, but not my problem.
Right.
What kind of a reaction is that?
Right.
Yeah. So it's seen as a crazy thing. And really that's just a product of the media, of misunderstandings about what people do, because I have dealt with a lot of people who would call themselves preppers, and you get some people who are across the spectrum on intensity, but generally they just want to provide for their needs. And almost everybody I've ever talked to about preparedness actually just wants to help people too.
So, Wesley, as you know, there's always homework.
There's always homework. So we want you to like, subscribe, fill out the alert button so that you are in the know whenever we post something here, because this content is for you guys. And we would love for you to leave us the 5-star rating, the thumbs up, all of that. And please also leave something you liked about the episodes. If it's Nat, if it's what he's doing over at Preparedness Works, if it's here, if it's us, it's the collaboration, please leave us something that we can interact with so we can keep the conversation going.
Yeah. And as always, if you have a question, you have a preparedness tip, a disaster story to share, send us an email at disasterclass@instinctready.com, or send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And doing so will always put you in the running to be featured on the show and win some cool stuff. Well, as always, thank you so much for tuning into Disaster Class. Stay educated.
Stay prepared.
Stay equipped. We'll see you next time. Disaster Class is part of the Readiness Lab, the home for podcasts, webinars, and training in the field of emergency and disaster services.